In this episode of Take Action Early, I'll be talking about the importance of choosing what you're conditioned by wisely during young adulthood. What's going on, people? I'm your host, Edward Imbanasaur. Welcome to Take Action Early, brought to you by Legacy Means Everything, a self-development and self-improvement platform for the young adult. It exists to empower young people to overcome fear of failure, procrastination, and boost their self-confidence and develop good habits so that they can follow a self-determined purpose and leave their mark on the world and live a meaningful life that even their haters would be proud of. If you like what you hear, be sure to leave a rating, your comments, and subscribe. I'll tell you more about how to do this later on in the episode. Conditioning is basically where you train yourself to respond in a particular way, dependent on what goes on in your environment. Usually what we're conditioned by can be due to what we're told by society. For instance, when you're young, you have no choice with what you're conditioned with. Your teachers condition you, your parents, and maybe what you see in the media. When you're young, you're like a sponge. You soak in everything and anything. This serves a purpose. Obviously, when you're very young, trial and error isn't really a good idea. You need somebody to tell you that you shouldn't put your hand in fire. Because if you weren't told that, you might lose a limb, which isn't really a good idea. So conditioning does have its purpose. It helps with our survival and rapid learning. It helps to simplify things. However, conditioning has its dark side. It can be harmful. For instance, harmful conditioning can box your mind, can put your mind into a box with cockroaches. Well, there are some people who eat cockroaches, but I'm sure for most of you guys, including me, you wouldn't want to eat a cockroach. So what I mean is, when conditioning is harmful, it stops you from living in a way that is natural to your frequency, your own personal frequency. And this is a huge issue today. Most people just accept whatever they've been told, whether it works or not, or whether it's healthy or not. So the average person today is just like a robot. They just react without thinking. A reaction without thinking can put you in a bad state. Like for instance, because most people are just reacting without thinking, self-confidence is at an all-time low, depression is rampant, and the obesity crisis is reaching breaking point. Because a lot of the stuff that society tells us isn't actually good for us. What we're told, the approach that's used by society is a one-size-fits-all approach. And that cannot work. It has never worked. What works for you isn't going to work for me. And what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. But yet, we've been boxed with cockroaches. Cockroaches that we don't want to be near at all. Another example of how conditioning can be harmful is in the 20th century, science told us that fatty foods were evil. Totally evil. We were told that all the health issues which were concerning, for instance, well, most particularly cardiovascular disease, that fatty foods were the main culprit. Yet plenty of studies have told us that no, fatty foods aren't necessarily the bad guy here. But because society has programmed people to believe that fatty foods are bad, people have just replaced fats with refined sugar. And this has been pushed by advertisements to help increase sales for food companies. And look at where we've ended up. We've ended up with an obesity epidemic in the Western world. So you can see here that conditioning can be quite bad. In fact, it can be life-threatening if you don't choose what you're conditioned by wisely. You don't have to be a public health consultant to know that there's something wrong with the advice that fatty food should be eliminated from the diet. Conditioning left unchecked can be disastrous. So what has happened is the majority of our natural born qualities have been suppressed and have been hijacked by society that tells us that what we're doing isn't normal. We've just been told that, okay, there's something that I want to do, and society will tell us, no, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that. And you ask them why, and they'll tell you, because you just can't do it. There will be severe consequences. I'm sure you've heard people tell you that you shouldn't do something because it will lead to nasty consequences. Yet, that wasn't true. And you can prove it to yourself by not listening to these kinds of people and proving to yourself that what you were told not to do wasn't actually bad after all. But the problem is that most people just believe what other people tell them. So over time, these people condition themselves to the point where they're not acting because they want to act. They're just acting because someone else told them to act in a particular way. Whether it's good for their health or bad for their health, or whether it's actually good for their situation or bad for their situation. Earlier this year, my younger brother, who is 12, told me that he lost marks on a test. What's funny is my younger brother is very sure of himself. He will tell you something and he believes it because he knows that he has the ability to do something correctly, which is a very good trait. And this is a trait that most young kids have. When we're young, we don't ever want to be wrong. We answer people back all the time. It's just natural. Obviously, being sure of yourself has its place. But what happened here is my younger brother was told that he shouldn't do a particular calculation with his own method, even though he got the right answer. And my brother actually came up to me, told me that he was annoyed at his teacher because he lost marks. And you see, this is why I don't emotionally attach myself to marks or grades, because usually exam marks or outcomes are based on someone else's criteria. And for most kids, and maybe even my younger bro, he might end up just giving in when he's told that he's been doing things wrong, even though he's right about it. But because somebody doesn't like what he's doing, he will just give up and not do things the way he wants to do things. And when you grow up with this mentality, you end up being in a bad spot. And you end up not being able to trust yourself. You rely on others to tell you what to do. Fortunately, for my younger bro, he will have me to wake him up if he ever falls into that trap. Right now, he's very sure of himself. He knows what he wants to do. But obviously, there's an overwhelming pressure from society to conform. So, overall, a lot of us are just stuck into a mentality engineered into us by others. And we just assume that's the way things should be. Even though we might end up stressed, unhappy, and even selling ourselves out for the approval of others. Even though deep down we know that what we're being told isn't right, or we should question it, but we don't, because we keep making assumptions. We don't check even though we should. Some of you will say that you have to conform to integrate in society. Yeah, that is a true point. You don't want to be known as an annoying and rebellious clown. You don't want to be known as that. But there is balance that you have to find between doing things your way and living up to a social code, especially when you're trying to climb a ladder that you need to climb to progress like everybody else does. But what people have done is they've just attached themselves to a rope that someone else is pulling to pull them up. They might be hitting the wall continuously, but they just assume that the person who's pulling them up has their best interests at heart, even though when they get to the top of that cliff, they're badly bruised. People give you their definition of the way things should be, and people automatically just believe it's gospel truth. Obviously, this is partly due to social engineering with its aim to make everybody think the same way. But you can be part of the 5% if you choose to be. You have a choice to actually question why you're being told what you're being told. Think about harmful conditioning. The reason why you have to be cautious about what you expose yourself to is harmful conditioning can take quite a long time to get out of, because once you develop these habits, it's very hard to abandon them. So when you're a young adult, it is very important for you to control what you feed yourself. Because I remember being conditioned myself in a negative way. Not that it was anyone's fault, but because of this mentality, this one-size-fits-all mentality that has spread throughout society. It's always been this way. People just assume that you can treat a fish the same way you treat a dog. Because that has happened, I used to just believe everything my parents and teachers told me, until I woke up back in 2014, which I discussed in my first podcast, my first episode. You can check it out. And then I began to notice that certain things wasn't working, so I began to question things. So what I do now is I put a sieve over my head. The things that I allow to pass through are things which are useful for my own growth and development and isn't harmful. So this is what I believe all young adults need to be doing. You will need to get your own sieves. The holes are going to be different sizes, different shapes, but you need to be able to extract what you need for your own growth and remove the stuff which will be detrimental, because as I said, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to things. And when I used this approach, this sieve approach, it eventually moved me in the right direction. And as I was moving in the right direction and following the right path that aligns with my natural abilities and my own personal agenda, which will take quite a lot to knock me off from. It will take a lot more than Superman. Come at me, bro. What I realized was my self-confidence grew. I was a lot more sure of myself, because in the past, because I was given a script by society that I was supposed to follow, and if I didn't reach these targets, it would become a burden to me. I would feel like a failure just because I didn't reach particular targets. There are some targets that I think you should meet, think that you should aspire to. For instance, making sure that you're in the best physical condition that you can be. You see, and also your physicality, you developing your body is also a very important form of conditioning, which can go wrong if you don't eat the right foods and stuff. There were certain things which became a problem because I started to associate my self-worth with certain outcomes I didn't know why I was following. I was just following them because I was told by other people that this is what I should be aiming for. I didn't know why I was aiming for them. Fortunately, one of the things I was aiming for which was getting into medical school, actually aligned with my agenda, but other things I didn't really know I was aiming for then. For instance, back at secondary school, you had this thing where everyone had to wear particular shoes, and I wasn't wearing those kind of shoes. And there was nothing wrong with my shoes, but from what you will see is people were being judged based on what kind of shoes they were wearing. They had to have a certain brand. People were more interested in superficial things. That's the way it is now. There was a study that came out that I read recently about how your appearance can actually dictate what people think about you, in the sense that people will think you're more competent at what you do just based on how you look. They don't look for evidence, they just look at what you look like. And someone else who might not be as attractive, even though they are a lot more competent, will just be looked down upon. But as I got older, I realized that following your own agenda is most important. And the way you do this is by putting yourself into an environment that is conducive to a healthy growth. You can find Legacy Means Everything on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Legacy Means Everything, and on Twitter at Legacy Mode. You can contact me through the contact section on the LME website to submit your questions, suggestions, comments or whatever else you would like to share with me. From what I explained in the last segment, you can see that conditioning has its good points and its bad points. So, as I alluded to earlier, the important thing that you need to do is you need to question everything. You have to make sure you are convinced that what you've been told and the people you interact with will actually help you move closer to your goals, to your own self-determined goals. As you grow up, you must ask yourself, why do you believe what you believe? Why exactly are you following a particular piece of advice? Are they really of benefit to you? You must always read between the lines to make sure that what you've been exposed to will work in your best interests. You must do this. I think it was around 2 weeks ago where I saw an advert on a bus that was marketing higher education with their promises to obviously draw in naive students. And what it said was 85% of graduates at a particular university got employment. But what they don't tell you is the kind of employment. They don't tell you whether the employment was related to their course of study. They don't tell you this. So when we see these adverts, especially when you're young, you will just assume that it's correct because it was created by people who are older than you, people who should know better than you. So you just believe it. But then when you actually look at the small print, a lot of things that we hear and see are completely false. But the problem is our subconscious can't divide reality from falsehood. It just can't do that. As soon as you get that dopamine rush, that dictates a lot of our behaviours. So conditioning really is a serious issue. It's a serious topic that you have to consider, especially when you're young. And once you're able to question things, it helps you to create a rock solid agenda. Because if you don't have a rock solid agenda, you're going to have a lot of difficulty reaching your goals. A lot of difficulty. Because not being stuck to an agenda in a strong way means you'll be jumping from diet to diet. You're never going to be on a consistent plan that will help you to reach your goals. Because it takes a very long time to achieve something. You have to stick to a particular process. If you keep jumping from process to process to process, you're never going to develop to the level that will help you to succeed. It's just not going to happen. So you have to be sure of your beliefs. You have to be sure that what you're doing is actually in your best interest. And this moves me on to my next point. You are what you eat. you're an average of the people you spend the most time with. Because what happens is you unconsciously develop a strong discipline to act a certain way dependent on the environment that you're in. People assume that people can stop being disciplined. No, it's about what you choose to be disciplined to. For instance, if you're following some kind of nutritional program that will help you to lose weight or add muscle or whatever your goals are, if you struggle to follow this program, yeah, you could say that you were undisciplined, but the thing is, you were also disciplined. You were disciplined to something else. You were disciplined to not adhering to this nutritional program. You were disciplined to a different kind of nutritional program or different kind of behaviors, which isn't or wasn't allowing you to achieve your goals. So that's why you have to make sure that your environment, your chosen environment, will help you to grow in the way that you want to grow. You have to put a plant in a particular kind of soil for it to grow healthily, or it will just wither away and die. When you look at other animals, a lot of them they come out in the seasons where they are most likely to thrive. Yet, a lot of us don't put ourselves in environments where we're going to thrive. A lot of the environments we choose is because other people choose those environments. We don't choose environments for ourselves. We might be guilt-tripped or shamed into doing things that we don't want to do. And that also has its conditioning effects. Your brain will learn that if you don't do a particular thing, you're going to feel bad. If you don't please this particular person, you're going to feel bad. Because you trained your brain to associate a particular negative response to not doing something. I hope you can see how important what you choose to expose yourself to actually is. It's very important. It's absolutely essential that you choose a place where you can thrive. Especially now when you're young, when you don't have much responsibility, you have a lot of time to experiment with things. Because it takes ages. It takes a very long time. You have to get to know yourself. You have to know how you work. You have to know what diet works for you. For instance, with food, whatever food you decide to eat, it will have a certain effect on your physiology, which means that a lot of your behaviors can actually be affected by the kinds of foods you eat. A lot of people actually underestimate the relationship between your diet and your mood. For instance, if I go on a massive carb binge because I have a crazy sweet tooth, they're so crazy that I'm actually going to create an episode and hopefully draw a lesson from some of my bad habits I used to have. But anyway, when I was having these carb binges, what happened was, if I wanted to do serious work, I had no motivation, even though I know I needed to do it and I wanted to do it. But because your subconscious has such a strong influence on your behavior, there are a lot of things you can consciously control, but there are certain things that are very difficult to stop. I'm sure that there's been times where you're just laying down and you know there's things that you need to do, but you don't do them because your brain has been conditioned, your behavior has been conditioned not to get up dependent on your environment. So the example that I'm using is the food environment. When I have too much sugar, it puts me to sleep. I can't help that. I just shut down. I remember when I was at university and I was sleeping everywhere. I was sleeping under tables in the library. Yeah, it was embarrassing. There were a few memes made out of me, but it just shows you that your environment is very important. The things that you expose yourself to is very important. It has consequences. Every environment that you put yourself in has a particular consequence. So you have to make sure that you examine your surroundings. Don't just assume that a surrounding that you're in is actually good for you. You have to do research about it. What effects is the environment you're in going to have on you? You are listening to Take Action Early. You can find this episode and the previous episode and all future episodes on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. A new episode will be released every Tuesday. Since it's impossible to escape conditioning, there are choices that you have to make within this situation. Yeah, fair enough. Conditioning has its effects, but fortunately, what separates us from all other animals is that we can make choices. We can make informed decisions. We can make a choice and take certain actions that will help us reach a particular goal. So from what I've done and what I've seen many other successful people do is they control what they listen to, what they watch, and what they eat. So what you have to do here is you have to create some kind of schedule to routinize what you're exposed to, because every environment that you put yourself in triggers certain habits, good or bad habits. For instance, with my nutrition, if I eat past a certain time in the day, I'm more likely to binge. So I have a food schedule. And what has worked best for me is intermittent fasting, where I will eat within a 6-hour window. And that helps me to control a lot of my urges, so I don't overeat. The key thing here is you have to be disciplined in how you enforce the desired environments that will help you to work at your best. Don't let other people guilt trip you into doing something that you don't want to do. You have to learn how to say no with confidence. Don't let anybody tell you to do something that you don't want to do, because they don't know how those kind of things affect you. They don't know what the consequences are. They don't know whether you're going to miss a deadline because you went out to an unplanned event which took away time from you or probably led to your illness, and that affected the amount of time you had to complete a particular assignment. In your youth, you have to be committed to a particular purpose. You can't allow distractions to come your way. You have to stick to your schedule, because if you keep changing environments, you're going to end up falling back into bad habits. And I've been there many times. Abrupt changes to your environment leads to you falling back into bad habits. So you have to make these choices to obviously maximize your learning in your young adulthood. You have to subscribe to good educational channels. For instance, instead of me listening to what I class as useless music at the gym, I will listen to a podcast, an educational podcast, which allows me to kill two birds with one stone. So what I suggest is you expose yourself to things which won't be taught in school. For instance, self-defense, how to exercise safely, good nutrition, managing your finances. These are issues that every young adult has today because of society's one-size-fits-all approach, which obviously doesn't work. Because if it did work, we wouldn't have a lot of young adults today with no purpose and very low self-esteem. So the advantage of being young is you can take advantage of the plastic nature of your mind. And when I say plastic, when you're younger, your brain is able to make a lot of changes. It learns things quickly. And this will allow you to make the changes, to develop things in ways or abilities or characteristics that you would like to have when you're an older adult. Because when you're older, it's a lot harder to change things. If you've been following an unhealthy diet for most of your life, or you've neglected exercise when you were younger, you're very likely to stay in those circumstances. Like, numerous studies have shown that it's a lot harder to change bad habits. Since you're a young adult, a young person, you haven't really got that many habits or bad habits. So this is the best time to develop as many good habits as you can. This is how you take advantage of the conditioning process. It helps you to, being young helps you to be selective about the environments you place yourself into, because when you're older, it's a lot harder to change those environments because you're used to them. You're so used to them. So many synapses have been created in your mind that it's so difficult to break apart. It takes maybe a midlife crisis to come out of it. But why would you want to reach the stage of a midlife crisis when you can avoid it right now when you're young by exposing yourself to things that will push you in the right direction? So gaining useful knowledge in your young adulthood should be a priority. You don't want to get to a stage in life where you tell yourself, oh, I wish I knew what I know at 65 when I was 20, 25. What's the point? Right now you have the resources, the time, and the ability to develop the right habits. Don't be like the average person who just goes through life and accepts what everybody or anybody tells them to do because they just can't be bothered to take responsibility for themselves. Why would you want to be in such a circumstance? It doesn't allow you to live a meaningful life, doesn't allow you to live a satisfactory life. Another advantage of conditioning yourself in a useful way when you're young is that you'll be able to accelerate your growth in a direction that you would like to go into. What you don't want to do is fill yourself with useless junk and then have to regress. You have to go backwards to get rid of it and develop new habits. That wouldn't be wise, would it? It wouldn't be wise. So what does it come down to? What is the bottom line here? The bottom line is you're going to be brainwashed anyway. We're all brainwashed in some kind of way. So you might as well brainwash yourself with useful stuff. The same way you have to feed yourself to survive. You have to feed yourself to survive. So you might as well choose good nutrition that will help you to survive in the best way possible. If you know there are environments or food out there that will help you to become the best version of yourself, is it not wise to put yourself in those kind of environments? I think so. So as a young adult, you have to be selective about your brainwashing. Yeah, it sounds like a negative word. Obviously, brainwashing is associated with people who are just like puppets. But the fact of the matter is, none of us are an island. We're all influenced by our environment. And a lot of people underestimate the environment. It's the same way people just assume that somebody can get very muscular because of their genetics. They just put it all on their genetics. When the fact of the matter is, the genetics plays a small part. The reason why this person added a lot of muscle is because of the environment they've put themselves in. They've conditioned themselves in a way to achieve certain results. And that's the key thing here. The environment is the key. So once again, make sure you choose what you condition yourself by wisely, especially now when you're young. It's a must. I'm telling you, if you don't do this now, you might set yourself up for some big trouble when you're older. Condition yourself in the right environments. Set your own agenda. Don't let anybody guilt trip you into doing something else that you don't want to do, and be committed to the process. I'm still a young person. I don't have all the answers. But what I've done is I've committed myself to a process and conditioning that will hopefully help me to achieve my vision. And I hope you will do the same. That's all I hope for. That's the reason why I'm doing this podcast. It's to motivate you to take action on concepts which you're not going to be taught at school unless you've done, well, this particular concept of conditioning is usually taught on some kind of psychology degree. But a lot of people don't study psychology. And that's all I have for this episode. Thank you for listening to this edition of Take Action Early. If you liked the episode, please leave a rating on SoundCloud or on iTunes. Or if you're listening on YouTube, like and comment on the video and subscribe. You can drop me an email at edward@legacymeanseverything.com to let me know what you think and leave your comments, questions and suggestions. If you found value in this episode, feel free to bookmark and shop through the Amazon link at no cost to you. You will find this in the sidebar of the LME website, or you can consider making a donation to support the show financially. You can find the link to do this in the show notes at legacymeanseverything.com/2 for more information on how to do this. It will help me to grow the channel and improve the LME platform. And you can also chip in to my cashew nut addiction costs or the cashew nut addiction fund. That's all I've got for now, guys. Talk to you next week. Adios.